The Vorshak hegemony fired a disintegration beam meant to crack a continent. On the Etheric Synod's main viewing screen, the incoming Ironhold flagship did not evade. It charged directly through the atmospheric dissolution wave. The vessel's hull flared a terrifying molten red, boiling the vacuum around it, but it refused to shatter. It just kept accelerating. Would you steer your own ship into a star-killing weapon just to protect a species you barely knew? It is absolute suicide, Sage Alara had whispered. That was 40 cycles ago, staring at a flickering console that smelled faintly of scorched ozone. The hegemony's ultimatum had just arrived. The Etheric Synod had always prided itself on logic, on the gentle and rational exchange of ideas across the stars. Archon Valeria sat at the center of the crystalline amphitheater, a quiet weight settling deep in her chest as she watched the representatives of 300 peaceful worlds panic. Overlord Malachor had given them exactly one solar rotation to surrender their core worlds. The Vorshak hegemony's jagged warfleets were already dropping from hyperspace along the perimeter of the system, blotting out the distant stars with their sheer, overwhelming mass. Beneath the high vaulted ceilings of the assembly, the air grew incredibly thin. Sage Alara activated the central projector. The holographic star map materialized, illuminating the terrified faces of the council. Most of the galaxy glowed in safe blues and greens, but at the edge of their borders sat the void scars. Gray, empty, forbidden. We built our worlds to be gardens, Alara said. Her voice caught, echoing off the polished stone. She pointed at the dead zones. They built theirs to be fortresses against the universe itself. For 3 millennia, the chaotic signals bleeding from the void scars had been classified as cursed knowledge. No sane species ventured into regions defined by crushing gravitational anomalies and violent cosmic storms. Garden Worlders possessed no weapons capable of stopping Malachor, which left only the impossible. They authorized Envoy Sarah to pilot a highly shielded scout ship into the abyss. The Synod watched her telemetry feed in an agonizing silence. When Sarah's vessel breached the Ironhold system, the Council stopped breathing. They expected scattered wreckage. Instead, they found a sprawling, hyper-industrial civilization thriving under conditions of pure torment. The massive orbital platforms were constructed from dark alloys and raw phasing crystals, spinning aggressively against violent solar flares. Sarah's visual feed stabilized to show her standing before Commander Morgan Jax. The human lacked an armored carapace. Yet, when Jax listened to Sarah's desperate plea and finally smiled, the Synod shuddered. It was a predator smile, promised a profound, ancient violence. Alara's instruments recorded the human's underlying physiology in real time, feeding the impossible data back to the bewildered Synod. The scanners indicated that this species had evolved on a world with such intense, unforgiving gravity that their skeletal density functioned like internal organic armor, while their cellular structure regenerated at a terrifying rate. They were the ultimate survival specialists, biological anomalies who treated lethal background radiation as a mild inconvenience and thrived in environments that would instantly vaporize standard galactic fauna. They were not just alive. They were designed to endure. Jax tapped a scarred finger against the console and offered a treaty. The Iron Accord. Protection in exchange for a recognized place among the stars. If you want to see what happens when peaceful garden worlds unleash a nightmare to protect them, join us as we open the next chapter of the archives. Valeria signed the accord digitally, her hand shaking violently over the console. They had allied with unknown entities to fight a known devil. And then the hegemony arrived. The sky above the Synod's capital world began to blister. Malachor's dreadnought descended, charging its primary weapons. A spatial tear ripped open the dark. Commander Jax's fleet arrived, positioning themselves directly between the hegemony and the fragile garden below. The garden worlds held their collective breath. Above the atmosphere, the Vorshak hegemony fired a torrent of localized radiation strikes. Valeria gripped the edge of her podium. The hegemony fought with refined plasma and calculated light. The Ironhold fleet did not. Commander Jax's fortress ships answered with brutal, unrefined mass. Massive cannons along their armored spines ignited. They fired kinetic slugs the size of small moons. The shields that stopped stars fell like glass before a simple chunk of accelerated iron. Valeria watched the tactical displays in absolute horror and awe. The hegemony's elegant energy barriers rippled and shattered under the sheer physical trauma. Debris rained outward. Then the Shardkin deployed. Utilizing raw phasing crystals mined from the hearts of dying suns, the human assault teams bypassed the remaining hegemony deflectors entirely. They flickered into existence right on the enemy hulls. Valeria's science officers frantically analyzed the incoming telemetry. The Void Husk boarding swarms were breaching Malakur's flagship. They were intentionally disabling the internal oxygen scrubbers. Valeria watched the biological readouts with a sickening realization of their anatomy. The humans were vacuum breathers. Their musculature adapted instantly to the pressure drop, their lungs collapsing gracefully while dense, oxygen-rich blood kept their nervous systems firing perfectly in zero atmosphere. They didn't just survive the vacuum. They called the empty, freezing dark home. And when the flare-walkers dropped onto the hegemony cruiser decks, the tactical feed showed them weaponizing the enemy's own attacks. Their dense armor absorbed the kinetic energy and radiation strikes, channeling the heat directly into their own crude, devastating pulse rifles. It was a slaughter, a calculated, terrifying dismantling of the galaxy's most feared empire. But Overlord Malakur was not defeated yet. From the core of his dreadnought, a blinding white light began to gather. The continent-melting disintegration beam. He bypassed the human fleet and aimed directly for the planet below, which brought Valeria to the moment that stopped her heart. On the assembly's main viewing screen, the molten red hull of Jax's flagship kept accelerating through the beam's focal point. The human vessel did not vaporize. Its kinetic energy absorption grid glowed white-hot, drinking the lethal radiation until the ship's entire forward prow resembled a small, angry sun. Jax rammed the dreadnought dead center. The physical impact was so catastrophic it snapped the spine of the hegemony flagship in two. Silence consumed the assembly hall as Malakur's vessel detonated into a silent, expanding cloud of ash and frozen metal. The surviving hegemony fleets instantly broke formation, retreating into deep space with the relentless human scouts pursuing them into the dark. Valeria stood alone at the central console long after the assembly had emptied. How long could you trust a weapon that thought for itself? Her hands moved over the datapad, finalizing the iron accord. The predators of the deep dark were now the official protective arm of the Garden Worlds. She felt a profound, chilling gratitude. They had invited monsters into their home to keep the wolves at bay. She activated the central projector one last time. The holographic star map hovered in the dim light. Where the void scars had once been marked as gray, empty dead zones, Valeria entered the new archival data. The map shifted, the borders recalculating, until those forbidden regions pulsed with the warm, heavy gold of an unbreakable alliance. Will the predators ever turn on the garden they swore to protect? Or is this the beginning of a true galactic balance? We'll be right here tomorrow with another classified file from the archives, so keep your comms open.